So my real point is, if you want to appear more pro, then put in the time and energy to make sure that people really can see and feel the flow of your music. Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is about approaching something that people often don't want to talk about, but if they often go down the road of, oh, well, what's the one thing that's stopping you from sounding pro? So I'm going to answer that question I keep seeing come up often. It's clickbaity, and yeah, so there's probably a little clickbaity to say it here, but I'm going to say one of the biggest things that I see here that stops something from coming across as feeling pro. Now, by pro, I mean flowing, seeming good enough to compete with whoever, whatever. And by that, I mean the greats. Good enough to compete in the market openly is actually the thing that ended up actually getting a name. Sorry, this is hard to sort of pin down, but ended up getting a name which I never liked, but eventually I realized, okay, I get what that means. The name attached was MIDI sound, and obviously that's absurd because MIDI has no sound. But I think what people were trying to get across with that was that where people just applied sounds to a MIDI file and thought they had delivered the thing, you ended up with something that sounded really not very good. Let me give you an example. Now, this music is made completely off the cuff, so it's not about judging whether the music's any good. It's probably pretty awful. But I want you to listen through and hear the stages of how we can transition it from what you might call MIDI sound to something that sounds smooth and polished in itself. Not about whether you like the genre, smooth and polished within itself. So we might think, yes. Okay, for what it is nice and smooth and polished, and there's a nice sense of space and movement in it. Yet what would often come across is actually this. Now, I think we can all tell that's not quite the same, which is easy to do when it's somebody else's stuff. It's easy to go, and I'm not going to say I don't fall for this myself, but I try very hard not to. What's happened here is that I've deliberately set this up. I composed this just in one pass, really, with the piano. Being such an amazing jazz musician that I am, the piano got one pass, that's it. And, well, it's unique playing. But that was part of it, that it was just meant to be full of movement. And then I massed in a string line to match. Is it good? Again, no. And nor is this in any way a poke, a reference, a response to directly anybody that I have spoken to in the last little God knows how long, but I keep seeing the issue come up. As a mix engineer, people send me things and I sort of go, well, this is going to be a little harder to mix to get the result that I know that I want to hear, and they probably felt like they were delivering, but they didn't actually deliver. And yeah, it's such a common thing that, yeah, if I'm going to pick the number one thing that causes people to end up having something that sounds not pro, is because they haven't thought about how to make it flow. So something that sounds like it flows, sounds like it's real, organic in itself. Let's throw out the word analog because it's stupid. Really stupid, the way people use it. But if it's organic, as in it seems like it could be real. We're watching Avengers full of CGI, but in that moment we accept that it's real, that there are these coming from utter space. Therefore, we can say that's organic. This is what we're chasing here. This original stuff, let's say my piano line here, does not feel organic in any way, shape, or form. So let's look at how I transitioned that from there to here. Now, I have not changed any of the notes. The bum notes are all still there. So don't go thinking, oh, well, you made it better by fixing all your playing. No, I didn't. My playing is as bad at the end as it was at the beginning. The initial stuff, and this is pretty common to see, is that people forget that synths have velocity options. And the velocity options can go from as simple as just the level. It's exactly the same sound, but a different level. That's pretty limited kind of mojo. But it's surprising what you can achieve just with level variation alone. So use level variation. You can see that the brilliant composer that I am has also used time as a factor. Now, where there's no level, I have still used time. Not particularly consciously, but something within inside of me when playing will make some notes longer or shorter. You can see it here. Obviously, for some reason, the inner musician in Benedict has had this note come off before these notes, even though it's actually the middle finger. So why don't I raise my middle finger before the others? That's some kind of innate thing. That's how a musician brings their uniqueness to it. But by leaving your performance like this at all the same velocity, really very unfortunate. So what if we take that same performance and just have velocity? Now in this case I did cheat. I did take this original performance and turn it all back to 100 as velocity. But if I had composed that and mastered all in at 100, then this would be very much a thing that would need to be done. Let's listen to this again. So we'll listen to the no velocity. Ugh. Let's go again, now with a lot of variety and velocity. You can see it here. So if we take this section, now the piano in Reasons ID8, not greatest piano ever, but far from worst piano. We can tell that there are sample layers. So when you play softer, you end up with a different sample than you do from when you play hard. And that's good because we've now got, with just velocity alone, a huge amount more variation, not only in level, but in tone. And we can hear what this amazing detailed composer has put in just with one variation, which is the velocity. Next step is that our composer, being somewhat incompetent, did not stop to think about a sustain pedal. I don't actually own one, but part of a real piano performance is a sustain pedal. You know, there are a couple of pedals on a piano. There's a damper, which I don't fully understand, to be perfectly blunt, but there's a sustain pedal. When you push the sustain pedal down, it means that every note that's been played until you release that sustain pedal just keeps going. So let's have a look at the very same performance with a sustain pedal. Without, see how it becomes very choppy with. Now let's listen to it again. There's another layer, thank you. There's another layer, and this is called phrasing. Phrasing in this is not the greatest, but there is an inherent sense of phrasing. Phrasing means like a musical sentence or a part thereof. Notice when I'm speaking, I will tend to pause to help you have greater understanding of the greater meaning of what I'm saying. See, so that's phrasing, adding phrases, which might be a whole sentence, full stop, pause, next sentence, or could be that we get halfway through the information, pause to help you digest that information, and then add the qualifying material after that. Oh, he was a very good-looking fellow. Pause, because he had such wonderful hair. Phrasing. Musically, we must phrase, but so often we forget to phrase, especially if we mass in. So you get gobs of sand that are just like bricks. And okay, you keep piling those bricks on top of each other going, I'm getting denser and denser, but you're getting harder and harder to pass, as in harder and harder to understand. So if we have a listen now to the sense of phrase. Now, did you pick them? Hopefully you picked that there are two phrases there. If we were to look at the sustain pedal, which is here, you can see that the sustain pedal goes down at the beginning of the performance. And then is released, but put back down again. What that means is that all these notes here are accumulating. They're continuing to play and resonate and fill out the sound space, fill out the composition, the feeling. And this is deliberate. This is part of why you use a sustain pedal. And then to signify that this phrase is finished, we clear the air by letting that sustain pedal up, push it back down again, and then we do the same thing here. All these notes are ringing through, filling the world. But it's let up and then push back down again for the next phrase. So just using the sustain pedal, we've massively increased our sense of phrasing. All right, velocity, and now sustain pedal, we have transformed from which is essentially so bad as to be unlistenable, through to which is interesting. Not whether it's any good musically or not, it's weird. I always do weird music. But it's interesting. It says something quite unique. It's a bit unique. We'll have one more round, though, with our piano. And this time, we are going to add another layer of modulation, which, unfortunately, does not display properly. But we can see it here. We'll watch the mod wheel. With ID8, raising the mod wheel on this piano sound makes it warmer. So we're now going to use tone over time as well to help shape our performance. So, no tone. That's just relying on these samples. Now we're changing tone as well. If you weren't seeing it, chances are you wouldn't be aware of it, but you'd somehow be aware of the changes in tone and feel as that rises and falls. So it's all about flow. We are creating a sculpture. So it starts with the tone quite bright and it falls. Comes bright, falls, bright and falls again. There is no right or wrong here. I could have decided to start quite dark, had it got brighter as I and then fallen and then raised again. There is no right or wrong here, but it's important to shape your actual performance, your actual phrases. both in level and in tone, and also in texture, which is what our combination of velocity, but particularly in this instance our sustain pedal is doing, is changing our texture. It's saying we can fill the room with that sound, then we can pull it out and start again with the next blob. So the difference is quite dramatic. And the thing is, I didn't become any better at all as a musician. I did not become more pro in any common way. I simply did my job, which is to work out how to make my thing, my story, seem more organic, to make it flow nicer. This is a thing that people tend to miss out on doing, often because they think, oh, I don't know how to do it. But take the time, understand the nature of the instrument that you're emulating, if you're emulating an instrument, in this case a piano. Okay, I don't know what a other pedal does. I know what the sustain pedal does, but the other pedal, the whatever pedal I mentioned it before, I don't really know what it does. So if I were emulating pianos more and more and more, I should go to Wikipedia, read what the pedal is, read what it does, look at YouTube articles, particularly those where they're looking down inside the piano and going, this is what happens when you use the damper. That's the one, damper pedal. I think of damper as bread. Bread and butter. So, round 2, which was to add a string. So, this is where we started. I deliberately didn't use a string sample. I used a synth, but it's not very good, is it? So let's move through the same stages again. Initially we have no velocity, and you can hear that sound just sort of switching on and off. It's angular and nasty. It's impossible to follow what it's trying to say or do. Let's add some velocity, which is just level and adjusting some tone as well, because it's adjusting how the filter opens, how the filter envelope opens. Now, it's still not good, but we have got more sense of flow and movement. There's an easier sense of, okay, where's the ups and downs in this? We rather than having this strange flat landscape like a Tupperware box upside down, we've now got a sense of some movement. That's just velocity. If we had a better line and we'd worked velocity right from the beginning as to how we, then that would make a lot more sense. But this is it's a pretty terrible line. Let's move to now moving some stuff within the synthesizer. I've actually added key velocity to the envelope attack time, which means that as you play louder and softer, the envelope opening, as into how early the sound happens, has been changed. So it's dynamic now. Here how we get a big difference. So same. Velocity. Just applying our velocity to whether our envelope opens faster with a harder note or slower with a faster note. It's up to you as to which way you go. I decided to go that the harder the note was, the louder it was, that the slower the envelope would open. Might be a little backwards to how it would normally work, but I've worked with, well, okay, what's going to give me the result that I feel works the nicest? That's all I'm interested in, is feel. And none of this is about thou shalt this, that, and the other, and circle of fifths, and it's all just about feel. It's my story, but I need to make my story flow. See how this flows so much nicer now. But knowing a little about strings, there's another thing that we can do, which is now to actually change the amplifier. So you see that I've taken the gain, which is like a volume knob inside the device. You can use whatever you want, including a volume knob, or add a device afterwards, like a select gain if you're in Reason, but anything that's essentially a volume knob, and then you can automate that, which is what I've done. I've just gone in and given it a curve. See how it gets louder and softer and louder and softer. Let's have a listen to that now. Sounds like a completely different performance, doesn't it? It almost sounds like we have got a, reasonably passable little string quartet section happening here. So we have gone from, which is just dire, to which now resembles a unique performance. So putting these back together again, we have gone from oh, that's just too bad, to this. Not a single note has been changed. So it's just paying attention to, how do I make these sounds speak? Your job as a musician is not to just draw dots on a page. That's kind of okay if you are the guy who is writing something for an orchestra to go and play. You can kind of do that, but you should still have a sense of how does this go, which is why on score you've got these funny little things, all these Italian terms and little lines that do this and that and this and what have you. They're all ways of saying, at this point we want you to speed up a little bit. We know we gave you a tempo at the beginning, but at this point we want you to feel like you're pushing. We want you to feel like you relax at this point. We want you to get louder as we go here. We want you to get softer as you go here. So the instruction is all there, but musicians forget about it. And then when they get into an environment like this, they know what they want to hear, which is like my option number 4, but then they forget to do the work and end up with that option number 1, which is just ghastly, really ghastly, but regrettable. Because option number 4 is available if you think, how does this work? How do I make this flow? And to be honest, the first time or two you do it, it won't come out a lot better, but it will come out better. You just keep going at it. And the way that you solve those problems is what's unique to you. Because everyone's going to solve those problems slightly differently. There is no one way to do it, and if you try chasing the one way, you watch somebody on a video and they say, well, we put this point exactly here and we put this point exactly here and you do exactly that, you have learnt nothing. Because you're not thinking about your piece and how to make your piece flow so that it goes from MIDI sound to a unique environmental performance of your story, what you're saying. The next thing that happens is that people will often try to cover it with reverb. To now, we have not been listening with reverb. We've had no reverb. But it sounds pretty good. There's another angle in which people let themselves down. This is more of a thing that if you're sending off to a mix engineer, that's their job. But if you're going to take the mix engineer's job, this is your job. So let's add a reverb, but we've added a pretty thoughtless reverb, as in it's just a stock preset of a hall. It's nothing against the device, but this is just thoughtless. It's not really helped that much. If anything, it's possibly hindered slightly because that reverb sound is in no way representative of those sounds. It doesn't represent particularly the piano. The piano is the lead here. The piano is the star here. The string is a supporting thing. So if we were to look at just our piano, so we'll mute our string. Okay, there's a reverb, it sort of helps, but it doesn't really give any character. And the fact that it has a reverb with no character makes us unable to feel where this is really supposed to be, which makes us then feel like this is not easy to accept as being real, just as those things in Avengers we accept as being real in the situation. Then I've added a different reverb. Now, in no way is that about whether you think that's a better quality reverb or not. It's technically not. It's deliberately quite awful. But it is built around the character of what's that piano maybe trying to say and feel like. Where is it? It's somewhere interesting, obviously, because that's an interesting reverb. If we whack our strings back in and go through the reverb options, none. Thoughtless. Unique. Notice that there's a real noticeable difference in how that flows. You may struggle to hear it consciously, but you should be able to feel it. So let's go back again. This is where we would have started. It's just nasty. If we would have used the better reverb, actually no, if we would have used we can fool ourselves that, oh, well, it sort of flows, but it doesn't. The better reverb. Interestingly enough, helps quite a lot. But we've still got some dubious playing going on here because it's pointless. Or altogether. This is how you transition from that, what you might call MIDI sound, and it doesn't matter whether you're playing for real or mousing your things in. That's how you transition from that kind of really thoughtless, unprofessional MIDI sound, because it says, I didn't try to get this done, through to something that we can call professional because it's unique, it's organic, it says how it wants you to perceive it. And that, to me, is the biggest difference between something that comes to me, whether as a potential fan on YouTube or wherever, or as a potential thing to be mixed, is that if somebody's put in the time and trouble to really make it flow, you know, where their strings or synth lines, if they hang, rather than just pressing the key and waiting for the off moment, they've worked, how is this sound going to behave from before or even slightly before it comes in, through its whole run, not to just go, oh, well, I've done that and I can forget about it, because that is amateur sounding. The whole run of what does it do in the middle, through to up to at least the point where it fades back into the background. People often go, oh, well, I'll take my finger off the note and I can forget about that now. It's done. It's over. No, it's not over. It's not over until it's fallen back into the noise, the background, and possibly even after that, which is part of why a great sound engineer will help bring your sounds to life with things like echoes and reverbs and the like, to keep them moving. Same with choruses and phases and flanges and what have you. It's often about helping them keep move through that. If you've held something for a long time, sometimes musically that's really the right thing to do, but that sound stops moving, therefore it stops being relevant. So it's about trying to make sure that that can move and flow, and that is not by thoughtlessly putting a side chain on it. That's as bad as not bothering. Making it go oof, 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 every time the beat goes is honestly as thoughtless. It's not to say that it isn't a potentially valid technique. I've done it. I mixed something recently which we mixed it without. We ended up putting it back in because it just didn't work as well without that thing. Therefore, it was a good choice. But there are too many times where it's just like, oh, well, I've seen someone do it and it's cool, and that's thoughtlessness. So my real point is, if you want to appear more pro, then put in the time and energy to make sure that people really can see and feel the flow of your music. If you do not understand the flow of your music, then take some time to actually understand the flow. If you think that music doesn't need a flow, that's tricky. You probably need to go and sit with somebody who knows what they're doing with regards to this. And that's not many music teachers, because sadly most music teachers will tell you, well, that dot's a C, press it for this long. A great music teacher will be straight away, right from the beginning, going, yes, you've got a C and a D and an E and an F and a what have you, but they will be helping you to understand, how does this flow as a phrase? What's this saying? And you need to know what your music's saying, and if you're struggling with that, arrange some time with somebody who understands this sort of stuff to help you get a sense of, how do I understand that? Because you can transition what is terrible music here. Terrible, duff notes, the whole box and dice. It's ghastly in the first instance, to become quite intriguing in the last instance. Same exact music. If you have questions or you want to hire me for mixing or for the sort of consultative tutorial type work, ask on down below. You have a great day, and seeing it's New Year's Day, you have a great year.